of the schoolboy starts questioning. The rebellious spirit of the child finds its tongue and opposes all kinds of oppressions. Hitherto silent schoolboy now starts attacking the formal system of education. He poses two questions in the fourth stanza. Let me read it out. How can the bird that's born for joy sit in a cage and sing? How can a child when fears annoy but droop his tender wing and forget his youthful spring? You can notice here that there are two question marks here. This stanza is studded with metaphors and figures of speech. The first figure of speech is the rhetorical question, and the next figure of speech is the metaphor. First of all, let me tell you what a figure of speech is. Figure of speech is an intentional deviation from ordinary speech intended to produce a rhetorical effect. ಅಲಂಕಾರ ಎನ್ನುವುದು ಮಾತಿನ ಹೊಸ ರೀತಿ. ಸಾಧಾರಣವಾದ ಮಾತನ್ನು ಕೈಬಿಟ್ಟು ಹೊಸದಾದ ನಿರೂಪಣೆಯಿಂದ ಓದುಗನ ಗಮನವನ್ನು ಸೆಳೆಯುವ ಭಾಷಾ ಪ್ರಯೋಗವನ್ನು ಅಲಂಕಾರ ಎನ್ನುತ್ತಾರೆ. Here we find two rhetorical questions. Rhetorical question is a figure of speech that doesn't expect an answer. The questioner puts across his opinions in the form of questions. Just see, how can the bird that's born for joy sit in a cage and sing? ಆನಂದಿಸುವುದಕ್ಕಾಗಿ ಜನಿಸಿದಂತಹ ಹಕ್ಕಿ ಪಂಜರದಲ್ಲಿ ಹೇಗೆ ತಾನೇ ಕುಳಿತೀತು ಮತ್ತು ಹಾಡತೊಡಗೀತು? ಇಲ್ಲ, ಹಾಡಲಾರದು. Answer is simple, but the poet doesn't expect it from the reader. The second rhetorical question is, how can a child, when fears annoy, but droop his tender wing and forget his youthful spring? ಹೇಗೆ ತಾನೇ ಒಬ್ಬ ಪುಟ್ಟ ಬಾಲಕ ಆತಂಕದಲ್ಲಿ ಮುಳುಗಿರುವಾಗ, ಭಯ ಕಾಡುತ್ತಿರುವಾಗ ತನ್ನ ಕೋಮಲವಾದ ರೆಕ್ಕೆಗಳನ್ನು ಇಳಿಬಿಟ್ಟು ತನ್ನ ಲವಲವಿಕೆಯ ಉಲ್ಲಾಸಭರಿತ ಯೌವನದ ಸ್ಪ್ರಿಂಗ್ ವಸಂತ ಕಾಲವನ್ನು ಮರೆಯಲಾದೀತು? ಇಲ್ಲ, ಮರೆಯಲಾಗುವುದಿಲ್ಲ. The answer is simple, but just observe the effect it produces on the readers. Now, one more thing. We find 4 metaphors in this section. 1. A bird that is born for joy. 2. A cage. 3. Tender wing. 4. Youthful spring. Of course, the bird that is born for joy is a metaphor for the schoolboy himself, and cage represents classroom or school. If you think again deeply, the cage can also represent the society in which we live. And the tender wings of the child, what do they represent? They stand for his fertile imagination with which he soars high in the sky. But in the classroom, there is no room for imagination. There is no scope for his creativity to bloom. Who cares for his imaginations and fantasies? And lastly, the youthful strain. Childhood is a state full of liveliness, exuberance, vigor, vitality, and spirit. That is referred to here as spring. It is always ever agile, ever active, youthful spring. It is a metaphor for the energy of the young boy sitting in the classroom. But how to showcase his energy in the classroom when he is confined to the four walls? How can he express his creativity, originality, individuality? Who is there to explore what is in him? See the sorry state of things. ಸಹಜವಾಗಿಯೇ ಹಕ್ಕಿ ಹಾರ ಬಯಸುವ, ಕಲ್ಪನೆಯ ಆಕಾಶದಲ್ಲಿ ವಿಹರಿಸ ಬಯಸುವ ಬಾಲಕನಿಗೆ ರೂಪಕ. ಕೇಜ್ ತರಗತಿಯ 4 ಗೋಡೆಗಳ ಪಂಜರಕ್ಕೆ ಉದಾಹರಣೆ. ಟೆಂಡರ್ ವಿಂಗ್ ಬಾಲಕನ ಕಲ್ಪನಾ ಶಕ್ತಿಗೆ ರೂಪಕ. ಯೂತ್ಫುಲ್ ಸ್ಪ್ರಿಂಗ್ ಅವನೊಳಗಿನ ಜ್ವಲಂತ ಉತ್ಸಾಹಕ್ಕೆ, ಲವಲವಿಕೆಗೆ, ಅದುಮಲಾಗಿಡದಂತಹ ಲವಲವಿಕೆಗೆ ಸಂಕೇತ. In the formal setting of the classroom, everything goes unnoticed. That is why he is sorry for. He wants to question everything. He doesn't tolerate this kind of passive attitude towards his innate potentialities. ಅವನ ಒಳಗೆ ಅಂತರ್ಗತವಾಗಿರುವ ಪ್ರತಿಭೆಗೆ ಅವಕಾಶವಿಲ್ಲದಿರುವುದನ್ನು ಆತ ಸಹಿಸಲಾರ. ಅದಕ್ಕಾಗಿ ಈ ಪ್ರಶ್ನೆ. Of course, this question is directed at no one in particular. That is why it becomes a rhetorical question. But it is not so in the next stanza. Let me read the 5th one. Oh, father and mother, if birds are nipped and blossoms blown away, and if the tender plants are stripped of their joy in the springing day by sorrow and care's dismay. Here, the schoolboy is specific. He directly attacks his parents. So, the onus is now passed on from the teachers to the parents too. He addresses them directly. If birds are nipped and blossoms blown away, and if the tender plants are stripped of their joy in the springing day by sorrow and care's dismay. ಏನು ಈ ಮಾತುಗಳ ಅರ್ಥ? ಮೊಗ್ಗುಗಳನ್ನು ಚಿವುಟಿದರೆ, ಅರಳುವ ಹೂವುಗಳನ್ನು ಕಿತ್ತೆಸೆದರೆ, ಕೋಮಲವಾದ ಗಿಡವನ್ನು ಅದರ ಸಂತೋಷವನ್ನು ಇಲ್ಲದಂತೆ ಮಾಡಿದರೆ, by sorrow and care's dismay, if people start torturing the child. ಇಲ್ಲಿ ವಾಕ್ಯ ಪೂರ್ತಿಯಾಗುವುದಿಲ್ಲ ಎಂಬುದನ್ನು ಗಮನಿಸಬೇಕು. The conditional clause if leaves some space for further argument, which is presented in the next stanza. Again, here there are metaphors. Bud is a metaphor for the growing child. Blossom, again, a little grown up young boy. Plant, again, a metaphor for a college student. and all of them are sitting in the classroom in grief, sorrow, and dismay, because all joy is robbed of them. School happens to be a place for the schoolboy not of finding his innate abilities, but of destroying them. That is why he is angry with the society, the setup, the formal schooling. The remarks in the 5th stanza are much more pungent than the previous stanzas. The schoolboy protests against the authoritarian ways of teaching, the cruel outworn eyes, and the whole setup which is rigid and which is not ready to change whatsoever. Here, the same expression is used to convey the idea of protest. Just see the expression in the second line, blossoms blown away. This is an alliteration. Alliteration is a figure of speech where a series of words that carry the same consonant sound appear. Further, just listen to the pronunciation of the expression carefully. Blossoms blown away. Blow, blossoms. The plosive sound produced by these two consonant words indicate an explosion. The boy too is exploding against the system. That is enacted in this alliteration. Further, I'd like to draw your attention to the last line. By sorrow and care's dismay. What does it mean? Yenidra artha? Care. Taking too much of care, it spoils the beauty of life. The child needs a space for himself that is completely his own. That private space enables him to grow further, richer in his life. Unfortunately, constant care by the parents, constant attention by the teachers spoil the individuality and privacy of the child. That is why it creates sorrow for him. To come out of his sorrowful state, he finds no means. That is the reason for his protest. Now, this tone of protest gets even more stronger in the final concluding stanza. ಕೊನೆಯ ಚರಣದಲ್ಲಿ ಬಾಲಕನ ಪ್ರತಿಭಟನೆ ಇನ್ನಷ್ಟು ಉಗ್ರವಾಗುವುದನ್ನು ನಾವು ಕಾಣುತ್ತೇವೆ. ಯಾಕೆ ಅಂದರೆ the last stanza is studded with a flurry of questions. See, the first 4 lines, all are in question form. All are questions. How shall the summer arise in joy, or the summer's fruits appear? Or how shall we gather what griefs destroy, or bless the mellowing year when the blasts of winter appear? Once again, we are introduced into the personification and metaphors. The first line, the summer arise in joy, is a figure of speech called personification. It is a figure of speech where inanimate or inanimate objects or abstract concepts are presented as if having life. How shall the summer arise in joy, or the summer's fruits appear? Here, summer stands for the youthful state of the schoolboy. If spring represents his childhood, summer presents the later stage of the schoolboy's life. And what about fruits? It is a metaphor for the results that we get after being grown, after getting education, after getting an employment or job, we settle in life. This settlement, this final result could be considered fruit in a person's life. But to get this fruit, the child should be free, independent. If grief destroys everything that is beautiful, lovely, and sacred, how can you expect a better result? How can you expect sweet fruits? The child is ready to bless the whole year, because year rolls by. It goes on mellowing year after year. Likewise, the child also likes to mellow, ripen. But is there an opportunity for ripening in the formal setting of school? Are parents and teachers concerned about the welfare of the student? Are his emotional, intellectual necessities met? Then how can you expect a peaceful individual from the classroom? The boy who comes out of the classroom needs to be an angry young man. Who else can you expect? Because, see the last metaphor in the last line, when the blasts of winter appear. Literally, blast is the continuous, incessant fall of snow in winter in European countries. ನಿರಂತರವಾದ ಹಿಮಪಾತಕ್ಕೆ ಬ್ಲಾಸ್ಟ್ ಎಂಬುದಾಗಿ ಹೆಸರಿದೆ. ಸಮರ್, ಸ್ಪ್ರಿಂಗ್, ಆಟಮ್ ಈ ಮೂರೂ ಕಾಲಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ಪಡೆದ ಸಂತೋಷವನ್ನು ನಾಶ ಮಾಡುವಂಥದ್ದೇ ಬ್ಲಾಸ್ಟ್ ಆಫ್ ವಿಂಟರ್. ಬಾಲ್ಯದಲ್ಲಿ ಯೌವನದಲ್ಲಿ ಪಟ್ಟ ಆನಂದವನ್ನು ದ ಬ್ಲಾಸ್ಟ್ ಆಫ್ ವಿಂಟರ್ destroys. Here, winter stands for old age. The elders, the parents, the teachers who belong to winter, they are in their winter stage. That's why the boy feels grief, sorrow because of the unpleasant experiences of life. So, how can you expect a beautiful song from a child whose childhood is robbed, whose joy of freedom is lost? William Blake represents not just himself in this poem, he stands as a representative of all children who suffer in classrooms. To draw your attention towards the first stanza, I go back to it. The poem begins with the first personal pronoun I, first person pronoun I, and it concludes with the plural first person pronoun we. How shall we gather? What griefs destroy or bless the mellowing ear? So, the whole poem is a powerful comment on the atrocities meted out by the elders towards the children. Well, you all know that this conflict is never ending. The conflict between childhood and adulthood. The conflict between innocence and knowledge or experience. Or the conflict between spring and winter. It is never ending. Just look at the last stanza. All the images presented are images of atrocities against the child and nature. Probably William Blake seems to suggest that the world of elders destroys the beauty of childhood continuously, incessantly. He seems to imply that whatever we do as elders appears to be anti-human, anti-nature, and also anti-spiritual. How can we make the lives of our children better, lovelier, and more joyous is a million-dollar question. Childhood is a phase in a person's life which is most precious because the child wants to learn everything by doing. He wants to touch, feel, see, smell, taste, and know the world on its own. If he is allowed to do it, learning takes place joyously and voluntarily. But if he is limited to a small area where he has no freedom of expression, his development is essentially hindered and blunted. ಮಗುವಿಗೆ ತನ್ನ ಭಾವನೆಗಳನ್ನು ವ್ಯಕ್ತಪಡಿಸುವುದಕ್ಕೆ ಸಕ್ರಿಯವಾಗಿ ಪ್ರತಿಯೊಂದು ಅನುಭವವನ್ನು ತನ್ನ ಪಂಚೇಂದ್ರಿಯಗಳ ಮೂಲಕ ತಿಳಿಯುವುದಕ್ಕೆ ಅವಕಾಶ ಮಾಡಿಕೊಟ್ಟಾಗ ಆ ಬದುಕು ಸುಂದರವಾಗುವುದಕ್ಕೆ ಸಾಧ್ಯ. ನಾವು ಹಿರಿಯರಾಗಿ ಮಕ್ಕಳ ಬಾಲ್ಯವನ್ನು ಹೇಗೆ ಮಾಧುರ್ಯಗೊಳಿಸಬಲ್ಲೆವು, ಹೇಗೆ ಸುಂದರಗೊಳಿಸಬಲ್ಲೆವು ಎನ್ನುವುದು ಅತ್ಯಂತ ಮುಖ್ಯವಾದ ಪ್ರಶ್ನೆ. The transition of child's life from family life to social life is a complex phenomenon. It is essentially a tedious one, a very painful one. When the child steps into the corridors of the school or the college, it expects the same motherly, brotherly affection from its classmates and teachers. If it doesn't get it, it feels like a fish out of water and bird nipped, tender plants stripped and blossoms blown away. It feels like it is out of its safety zone. Then no learning can take place in an atmosphere where grief, anxiety dominate. If the child wants to learn something, the atmosphere must be conducive for learning. How to create such an atmosphere, we all should think seriously. My dear friends, let me conclude my speech by reciting or by reading a novel, a part of a novel for you. It was Monday morning. Swaminathan was reluctant to open his eyes. He considered Monday specially unpleasant in the calendar. After the delicious freedom of Saturday and Sunday, it was difficult to the Monday mood of work and discipline. He shuddered at the very thought of the school, that dismal yellow building, the fire-eyed Vedanayagam, his class teacher, and the headmaster with his long cane. My dear friends, poetry is open to discussion. This is just one kind of interpretation that I have tried here today. Please understand the poem from your own perspectives and let it bring joy and happiness to all of you. Let us all keep growing and keep learning. Thank you.